Hello, everyone. Peppe Merolla here. Again, today is a wonderful, wonderful feeling and a privilege to have another great friend, especially great human being, but one of my mentor and the great jazz master, the one and only Mr. Carl Allen, right here. Hello, Carl.
Hey Pepe, how you feeling? Great to see
I am
you.
doing great now. To seeing you, it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
Well, welcome. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much for being part of this. It really means a lot to me.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I see some people start writing stuff. We see Carl, Chris Bernardo. Please, we're going to be answering everyone. As you guys can see, they're really killing me with those. Let's see. We're going to answer that later. But first of all, I know that was a long, it's a long test. but but anyway, welcome, 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 and thank you for doing it. Now, since I'm kind of like also, I'm shaking in my boots, actually,
Oh, please.
No. I really see. I choose that video as an introduction with the great Freddie Hubbard, because that solo, the whole playing, the whole thing was great. But the solo that you took, that solo, it was one of the very first solo that when I saw you doing it, playing it, I saw the drum history is in there.
Mm,
But besides that, I saw the voice of Carl Holland. Even
thank you.
though I was analyzing the whole thing and I watched it a million times, but at the end, I always come up with the same conclusion. It's like, yes, but he has his own voice. And afterwards, I got a question for you about that,
Okay,
because I think it's very important for a lot of a lot of drummers to know certain things, and especially when it comes from a jazz masters like you.
sure.
So now, would you tell us some about you? Where were you born, and how did you start? What it made you, decide to be a drummer? When did you start? What it motivates you? What inspired you to be a
W-
drummer?
Well, I'll tell you that first little question that came up, I only saw part of it, but he said he saw me at a clinic at Drums and More in Wisconsin. That was in Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm actually from Milwaukee. So
Oh,
Milwaukee, of course, is the jazz capital of the world that we know. So I
mhm.
started. I'm the youngest of five kids, and I always say that everyone in my family played an instrument at some point, except for my sister, who just talked a lot. But my mother was a gospel singer in church, and we were just raised by my mother. But music was kind of all around, and I grew up in a neighborhood in the projects where there were a lot of really talented people who were not really musicians. I mean, there were guys who would sing in these doo-wop groups on the corner, and guys who just played a lot of records, and people, but people really had a love for music.
Of
But that
course.
was really mostly R&B and soul and gospel, and then I didn't really get into jazz stuff until till I was a teenager, junior high school and then high school. So that's kind of how it all really started.
Right. And what was the first jazz records that put it
Oh,
back in your side? Here it is. What is it? What is it? I fell in love
well,
with it.
well, the first jazz record I bought, I didn't like it actually. It was a record, I don't remember the name of it, but it was by Benny Carter, great alto
Oh,
saxophonist. And I'll never forget, I was probably 12, and I was getting an allowance, and I bought the record for 50 cents, and I was mad because I spent 50 cents and I didn't like it. All right. So I told my brother, trumpet player Eddie Allen, I said, "Man, I don't like this record." And I was listening to a lot of Cool and the Gang and Barclay, Barclays and people like that. So he looked at it, he said, "I'll buy it from you." I said, "Well, how much?" "I'll give you $1 for it." I said, "Okay." He didn't know I paid 50 cents. So
right?
I doubled my money. I got, and at that time with 50 cents or with $1, you could buy a big old bag of candy. So I was just happy I got my 50 cents back plus enough for a big bag of candy. So, but then after that, I started, checking out, like Ramsey Lewis, that Maurice White was playing drums,
Yeah,
and
piano.
yeah, and so I was getting into like, you know, it wasn't really serious, straight ahead stuff. The kind of stuff, kind of on
More
the
like
cusp.
smooth jazz.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it wasn't even smooth jazz, like soul jazz, And
Yeah,
then I was really into the fusion stuff. I mean, like my first drum guy was Billy Cobham, and this was, the stuff in the '70s, and
spectrum.
Spectrum and Red Baron and Funky Thought of Sings and all of that stuff, right? And I was really into that. And then it was when I got to high school, I had a band director who was a drummer who would bring me records with Philly Joe and Max and Art Blakey and those guys, tell me to take them home and check them out. So that was
Sure.
kind of, I just remember hearing Art Blakey play a press roll, and I was like, whew, what was that? It wasn't the same kind of press roll we played in concert band, that was for sure. But yeah.
So this was your the very first approach to jazz music. Somebody said, "Here it is, Art
Yeah.
Blakey. Go home, cold turkey. Thank you very much."
Yeah, right. Now do that. Right.
Well, that's wonderful. Let's see. I would like to ask those friends, those guys, please, if you guys have any question, please ask, take advantage now, because the idea of this live stream, and I'm very thankful that many of those great musicians and are really supporting my idea, is to have a video, not just about an interview, but it's more like also an opportunity for many people out there that they don't have the opportunity to talk, ask questions on a daily basis with such a great jazz masters. Okay, so please get your head together right now. Ask yourself a question. We'll be waiting, because that's important. It's not about me. This is about the music, and it's about sharing, and it's about the love. So please don't feel shy if you guys have any question. So I see some people watching,
What's up,
and
Jonah?
yeah. Let's see. Now, so we got this question down. Now, my next question to you is this. First of all, I would like to tell people how we met. First of all, as a musician, of course, I knew Carl Allen for a very long time. Been checking him out. Sometimes, actually, I bumped into you a couple times, and since I never met you, I was so shy. I didn't even say hi to you. I looked at you and I was like, that's Carl Allen. Then I walked
Please.
straight. I was like, it happened a couple of times. Yes, it did. But then finally, I think it was like 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, in California. Yeah.
Yes. We met through a mutual friend, the great Vincent Herring. Vince called me up and said, let's go to the movie theater.
Yeah.
What kind of movie? And are you by yourself? He goes like, no, I'm with Carl Allen. I says, man, Carl Allen, I don't know him. He was like, come here. So that's how I met Carl Allen. We went to the movie, and we watched Mission Impossible.
Yeah, right.
That's how we met. But here it is. Where are we? What was your first record? Okay, now that's for the upcoming and young drummers. How important it is transcribing the masters.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it's a great question, and I think it's very important. But here's the thing with transcribing. I think to get the most out of transcribing, it has to be personal in terms of why you're doing it. Quite often I'll ask young musicians, drummers, saxophonists, whomever, are you transcribing? Yeah. I said, great. Well, why are you transcribing? So, see, See, because really they don't know, other than the fact that their teacher said they should or their friends are doing it. Okay, but it's got to be personal for you, you know. And when it's personal for you, you're gonna get more out of it, you know.
Yeah.
It's like say for instance, if I transcribe Philly Joe, well, it's got to be because there's something that he played that resonated within me
That
that I
yes, and you related to.
yeah. And so the idea, and I think everyone's reason is personal, and that's okay. But for me, it's about trying to one understand their conceptual approach, and then also find a way to try to incorporate that to expand my own vocabulary. You know, the thing we got to understand, all of this music that everyone puts out, from us to everyone who's watching this, is just on loan, right? It don't belong to us. It's just on loan. So all of the stuff that Philly Joe and Max and Tony and Art have done, now that it's on recording, they're loaning it to the rest of the world. So our job is then to take it, figure out what we can really grasp a hold of, and then try to find a way to personalize it and make it our own.
That's perfect. And now guess what my next question is? Because
Hmm.
this you just answered the two questions, but my next question was this: how important it is not to sound like them.
Well, here's the thing. I think, and this is something that was explained to me by Billy Higgins and a couple of guys like that. They say once you get to a certain level in your playing, you become maybe not so much a part of the branch of the jazz tree, but maybe a leaf on the limb. So, in other words, you know, okay. So I always say you get to a certain level, we all have what I call a fab five. There are five people that we can just immediately identify with. For example, my Fab Five are Art Blakey, Tony Williams, Elvin Jones, Billy Higgins, and Roy Haynes. I can transcribe Max of Philly Joe, Jimmy Cobb, Specs Right all day, and it's going to come out sounding like one of those five guys. And because those are the ones that I feel like I have a musical kinship with, right? And so the question becomes, you know, you got to think about how do you hear yourself represented on the instrument? It took a long time for me to get to the point of being comfortable with how I heard music, you know, because until you get to that point, you know, sometimes you're chasing something that doesn't really belong to you. You know what I mean? So it's like for instance, I love Al Foster, you know, and if I had a five
Yeah,
six, he'd probably be the six, right?
like that,
I,
yeah.
I I love Jimmy Cobb, but if I try to transcribe something like Jimmy, I might get the sticking and the rhythm right, but it's still gonna sound like one of those other guys because that's who I have that musical kinship with, you
Yes.
know. And as Higgins described it to me, he says, Carl, this may not even be something you understand, but it is what it is. So I'll tell you something. When Billy Higgins had a kidney operation, right, and he had come back, and it was his first gig back. He was playing the Village Vanguard in New York. This was a couple of months after Art Blakey had died. And I remember everybody was down to hear him that week. And I remember going to hear him. And Higgins used to always call me baby boy. So I remember going to hear him. And I'm standing in the back of the club. So as soon as he come off the bandstand, he sees me and he comes and gives me a hug. And man, I'm crying. I'm tears in my eyes. I was just so
Great.
happy. I'm just so happy to see him. And you know, we had been in communication while he was sick and all. Okay, so and we're hugging. He's hugging me, and I'm in his ear. I said, Higgins, I said, man, I don't know how to tell you this, man. I said, but while you were playing, it's like I heard Boo coming out of you. And he kind of pushed back a little bit, and he looked at me. He said, Carl, you heard that? I said, yeah. He said, Boo was in my ear all night. And so, for those who don't know, Boo is Boo
It's
Hayner.
not
That's
great.
Art
Yeah.
Blakey.
Yeah.
And he said, man, Boo was in my ear all night. And I was like, we both sat and looked at each other, just laughing and smiling. I mean, smiling and crying at the same time. It was a spiritual moment that was just unreal, you know? So
That's
when we
it.
start talking about at that point to where the ancestors speak to you through this music, you know, there's some dues that you have to pay in order for that to start to happen, though.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's a wonderful statement you made right there. And in fact, I got too much of a drummer questions here because you just answered my next question at the same time. So before I even ask, do you believe that it's important to have your own voice? And if yes, how that can happen? You just answered that.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people who have their own voice of any instrument, I don't think many guys that was their intent, right?
That's
Like for instance, like you were saying, from the clip that we watched at the beginning, that you could tell I had my own voice. At that age, I wasn't thinking about that. The only thing I was thinking about playing with Freddie Hubbard was all of those people. Like you could hear from that clip, I was really into Tony Williams at that time, right? But
yeah, but I also heard. No, 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 no. Yes, 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 definitely, yes. But I also heard Max in that one.
yeah, yeah.
I
Well, if you
also
hear if you hear if you hear Tony, you hear Max,
yeah,
right?
and then I also heard Alvin on that one, but the modern Alvin, which it's
Yeah,
all related to Tony anyway.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
and it's
See,
like, wow,
but the thing is that playing with Freddie every night, I was very conscious of all of the people, all of the drummers who played with him.
of course.
And I remember at one point it got in my head so bad where I spoke with Freddie about it. And I said, Freddie, I said, listen, man, I'm just trying to figure out, you played with Max and Tony and Art and Elvin, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to get this stuff together. And he said to me, he says, you know what, Carl? I said, what? He
Well,
says,
you
I have all of their telephone numbers. He says, if I wanted them, I would have called them. He said, I want to hear you find you. I was like, whoa, okay, all right. Let me try to figure that one out.
that's beautiful. That's the
But
answer right there.
yeah, but it's funny. It's funny, Pepe, because a lot of people ask me over the years, what was Freddie like as a band leader? And I tell him, I said, I didn't understand and appreciate the value of his leadership skills until years later. For example, he never told me how to play. And I've heard someone say, well, man, that's not really being a great band leader. You need a band leader who's going to tell you how to play. I said, yeah, but at the same time, because he didn't tell me what to play, he gave me the freedom to explore.
To express yourself at 100% and not
Yeah.
feel
And
to what to make you play in a certain way because that will stop your creativity at the same time.
yeah. And people don't understand the value of that. And now if I played something that just was not happening and I kept doing it, he wouldn't say, man, that sucked. Don't ever do that. He would say, man, try something else. And again, I didn't understand it right away, but basically what he meant was that thing may not work for this, but don't throw it away. Put it on the shelf and it might work for something later on. But that thing is not going to work for this. Try something different. So to have the creative freedom to explore is such a gift and a blessing to be able to have that.
That's wonderful. That's great. That's great. I agree 100%. I have some people here asking questions. Let's see what's happening here. Living at no, I'm going to put it on here. Living with other musicians affect how you approach the drums?
Well, for me, I don't. The only other musician I've ever lived with was my brother, who's a musician. Then after that, it was my wife, who's not a musician. So, but it can. I mean, depending on what kind of relationship, personal and musical, you guys have.
We got some other question here. Who's that now?
So Steve wants to know how much of your voice is from your playing, and how much is from your tuning and cymbal choices. That's a great question. Well,
Hmm.
I think it's an extension, right? Because um, one of the important things that I had to learn is how I heard the instrument, and that's a really important thing. And it was an important turning point for me because until I figured that out, you know, I was insecure and very much concerned about the acceptance of my peers. Give you an example. Many, many years ago, I would watch some of my peers, people like Jeff Tain Watts, Lewis Nash, Marvin Smitty Smith, a bunch of guys. and I would see them with gigs, and I would say, man, I wonder how they got that gig. I wish I had that gig. The next guy, man, I wish I had that gig. I wonder how they got that gig. I wonder if I should be playing more like so and so. Blah 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 blah. Okay. So after that, some years after that, I remember a bunch of us are hanging out, and I remember just mentioning that to them, and they all just kind of looked at each other and looking around, and everybody started laughing. I'm like, what? And everybody said, they all said the same thing. Say, Tane would say, well, man, I used to see you with certain guy. I wonder how you got that gig. So we were all wondering that about each other,
Yeah.
right? And part of that just because we were all insecure, young, and just looking for acceptance. But my point is, when you get to that point of accepting how you hear yourself represented on the instrument, it becomes less about comparing yourself in a competitive way. You know, it's kind of like I say, okay, this is how I hear myself on the instrument. Not that any other way is better or worse. This is how I hear myself on the instrument. You know, and so it's really important. And once you understand that, then it's about your touch. And then from there, you say, okay, this is the sound that I'm hearing from a cymbal. You try to find that symbol. But more importantly, a lot of it's going to come from your touch. You know, great Harold Mayburn, who I know you knew, he used to say that, you know, your touch produces the sound. And then I like to say it's not the other way around. And see, and I used to see early on in my time with Freddie, man, every drummer you can imagine would sit in. And I remember the first several times they would get up after playing, and I would get back up with key in hand, getting ready to retune the drums because I just knew they had retuned them. And then I would just tap them before tuning them, and they sounded the same when I played them, but they sounded different when they played them. It took me a long time to figure out it had nothing to do with the tuning. It was more their touch.
In fact, I confirm that. I agree 100%. I got a story. You know, I used to live close to Philadelphia, right?
Mm-hmm.
I used to live in this town called Yardley, PA,
Yeah.
which is like 20 minutes from Philadelphia and 1 hour from New York City. So, to make long story short, there's a place in Philadelphia. There used to be a place called Orlib's Jazz House.
Oh,
You remember,
Mickey Roker.
yeah, you remember that. And one night, I mean, every Tuesday night they had a jam session there, and you know, many times it happened that I was on the gig for the Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Then I got my own gig there and doing different things. But what happened? It's something that it really blew my mind. I brought my drum set one night in with my cymbals.
Yeah.
No, I brought my cymbals with me. It was my gig. Yeah, I brought my cymbals. Then Billy James came in.
Mm-hmm.
You remember Billy James?
Sure, yeah.
From Sonny State and Patterson. So
Yeah.
Billy James came in and he was like, "Hey man, can I sit in?" And I was like, "Man, you kidding me? Of course, man. You know, that's my drum set. You know, make yourself comfortable. I'd love to hear you." And same cymbals, same snare drum, completely a different thing.
Yeah.
So the story that you just told me, it just it related me. It brought me back to that moment that Billy James came in, using the same right cymbal, different, different sound. It's the way.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, and I've shared this story a billion times in clinics and interviews, but there may be one or two people who have not heard it. Where, many years ago, I was about 23. I was playing with Freddie, and we were in Paris, and on the bill was Higgins and Art Blakey. And at that time, Art used to always take his own drums, but also at that time, the airlines and they would just lose your stuff all the time, right? Italy, especially, and France, they go on strike just because the sun didn't come up when they thought it was going to come up. So anyway, we were playing in Paris, and Art's some of his drums didn't show up. So we all had to play the same drums. These drums were probably the worst set of drums I've ever seen or played in my life. I mean, the bass drum was like 26, 28 inches. Wow. No heads on the bottom or front of any of the drums. No spur. They had bricks holding up the drum. Anyway, but Art played, and it was unbelievable. Same drums. Higgins played, same drums, absolutely magical. I played, It was probably the worst thing anyone ever heard. So after the set, I'm backstage and I'm in, backstage and I'm mad. I'm kicking over chairs and throwing stands, pissed off. And Art comes to me and he puts his arms around me. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Art, to show you how smart I was at 23, I said, my drum rider said a 10-inch bass drum and 4 cymbal stands. Rah, rah, rah. And Art said, "Let me ask you a question." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you play the drums or do the drums play you? Because if you could play, it wouldn't really matter." And he just walked away laughing. And I was like, ooh. But what can I say? What can I say? Him and Higgins played the same drums and they didn't tune nothing, right? And they played the mess out of them. I was like, golly, right?
Wow, we got somebody else here. Let's see. You mentioned that most of your family play musical instrument. I recently picked up a Jack DeJohnette album where he plays piano. Do you play any other instrument? And did?
And did. I didn't see the rest of it, but okay. Well, I primarily just the drums now, and I write a little bit on vibes, probably more so than piano. I would never, ever, 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 ever take the vibes out of the house to try to do a gig. And the only reason I use the vibes to write is because when I first started college, I was a classical percussion major, where I was playing mallet instruments. And then when I transferred schools to William Patterson, um, I was a jazz major and I wasn't allowed to play the vibes because they don't belong to the classical department. So after I got out of school, it was an opportunity for me to, buy some vibes just to use it to, to write and practice on a little bit. So that's primarily, any other instrument that I mess with. And at one point I was doing, more percussion stuff too. I was hand percussion stuff. So, but not in a while.
What's this here? Oh, I saw Carl Allen do a clinic at Drums and More in Wisconsin when I was 13 or 14 years old. This clinic really, yeah, my interest in jazz music. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, that's that store that's in Madison, Wisconsin. I don't think they're there anymore, but yeah.
Let's see. So please, guys, make sure you guys prepare your question. We got some maybe another 20 minutes or so. So take advantage of this now. My next question would be is if you don't mind.
Sure.
What?
Hold on one second. Yeah, babe. Okay. I'm doing an interview online right now. Oh, I'm sorry.
So no, I was wondering favorite records that any drummer is supposed to have. A must to have drum recording. That's important because a lot of people they say, "Hey man, do you suggest any record?" And I give them some. I make a list of the stuff and I send to them. But it's very important because sometimes, people buy stuff that they don't know.
Yeah.
And then they go home and they want to resell it for 50 cents and make another 50 cents. What do you suggest? What do you think drummers are supposed to have? It must have for drummers.
Well, I'll give you a few, and probably for different reasons that we mostly think about, right? So for many of us, when we think about favorite records, it's because of all of this power and technique and all of that stuff. And that's great. It's a billion records to listen to for that. And I listen to records for that. But sometimes the things that really pique my interest are where the stuff is just so subtle. For example, one of the records that have some of my students checking out right now is Quincy Jones' "Walking in Space." Okay, well they do Killer Joe, and most drummers, most of the students, I say, practice with that record. And what is it that they do? The majority of them, they just play the classic organ groove. And okay, so Grady Tate is the drummer on there. I said, that's not what Grady's doing. And the subtle thing that they miss is that when they get to Hubert Lawes' solo, the first solo, Grady goes from playing 2 and 4 on the hi-hat to playing quarter notes on the hi-hat. And that's a subtle thing. but it's so subtle that most guys miss it. Most guys miss it. And I say, well, why is it significant now? And I heard a backstory just recently, as long as I've been listening to that record. um Jeff Hamilton was telling me a funny story that Ray Brown told him, that when they did that record, Quincy of course was friends with Ray and with Grady. So he goes to Ray and says, man, boy, oh boy, do I have a drummer for you. And he tells Grady, boy, oh boy, do I have a bass player for you. And they had not played together before then. So when they go into the studio, they were both kind of posturing like, well, who is this guy, right? But as they started to play, Grady felt that Ray played a little on top of the beat. And this may have been one of the first takes that they did on the record. So when they get to Hubert's solo, and a quiet instrument, he felt that Ray was a little bit on top. So he just started playing quarter notes on the hi-hat, along with the quarter notes on the ride cymbal. So, and it's subtle things like that, man, that tell me how intentional these guys were about orchestration, about setup. Another great record to check out when we talk about that is Oscar Peterson's West Side Story with that Thick Pen. I mean, some of the stuff that Thick Pen does on there is just like masterful, right?
Now, I've got a question for you because you made me think about this. So on the Killer Joe, yes, the quarter note on the red cymbal and the hi-hat, nice and solid. But if I'm not mistaken, because a lot of people, they play the conga beat with the left hand, which is not what it is.
No.
The rim shot is on the fourth beat. And then rim shot, right?
Yeah.
So that's what it was. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Now there was a period where guys were playing the rim shot more on 2 than 4.
No, it has to be on 4.
Yeah. There was a lot of guys that were doing 2 for a minute. And I remember early when I was 18, I did a gig with James Moody, and I was doing that. And he was like, man, don't do that on the break. I'm like, well, why? I thought it was hip. He said, I don't like the rim shot because it makes me feel like I'm in a box. But it was a great lesson, because one of the things that I had to learn early on was that everything is relative. So in other words, for some people that might work, but for him it didn't work. And so one of the reasons why it's so important to check out so many records and to ask questions is so that you learn to meet the music and meet people where they are. Because I don't know, I like to consider myself what I call a blue collar musician, in the sense that I'm there to serve the music. It's not about me. I'm there to serve the music. I don't care if I take a solo. If I can make some toes tap, I'm good with that.
That's
and I'm not saying any other way is wrong, but just for me.
Yeah, it's about the music. Let the music come. I remember the great, I was a very good friend with Mickey Rooker, and Mickey told me the same thing. Let the music come to you. Please the music.
Yeah.
You can start from a very simple thing that is going to inspire. That simple thing will inspire you and lead you to something, great. But don't think and play to impress anybody. He said, let the music come to you. It's about to me. Listen to what's happening in the band. Listen to the music, and it's please the music. Let the music come to you.
And I tell you, if you listen to those records with Mickey, with Duke Pearson, boy, that's just a great example of just that, man. Or even the stuff with Ray Brown and Cedar and Milt Jackson. It's just, unbelievable.
And see, we got somebody else here. Where are we? Mr. Allen, we got this one first. Let's see. Thank you both for doing this. Any stories about the most surprising differences you have experienced when listening to any of the masters on recording versus seeing them alive?
Yes, I gave you the perfect example. That's a great question. Before I ever saw Elvin Jones live, listening to him on record, first of all, listening to him on record as a teenager, I had made up my mind that everybody else was wrong and they were crazy because this guy really wasn't that great. Right? Because I'm listening and I kept putting the needle back and I was like, man, he keep turning the beat around. What's wrong? What? Right? Of course, as I got a little older, I realized I was wrong. But listening to him on record and having not seen him at this point, I always imagine him bringing his hands up very high, right? Because he has such a big sound. And even before I saw him live, I saw him on this PBS special in 1977 called A Different Drummer. And watching him on video really changed my world around because two things. One, the first thing that I noticed was how low his hands were to the instrument in terms of just control. You know, occasionally you would see him do that, but both basically his hand was very close to the instrument, which talking about control was amazing. And then the other thing that he said, and I was 16 and I didn't understand it. I just wanted to tell myself that it was deep, but it scared me at the same time. So Elvin was talking about colors. And he said, well, you know, every part of the drum set, you know, is a different color, you know. So if this cymbal here is yellow and this one is red, and I hit them together and I get orange. And I was like, I was trying to tell myself that was deep, but it scared the mess out of me, right? So, and I remember years later asking him about that, and he was like, "Yeah, the colors." I was like, "Okay, Elvin, all right, I got it now. I got it." But he was the one that really messed me. And I'll tell you, being able to sit 2 feet from Art Blakey and watching him play a press roll was life transformative. I mean, young people don't know what a telephone book is anymore because everything is online, right? But we grew up at a time where they had these thick telephone books, yellow pages or white pages. And I always say the analogy, listening to him is playing press roll was kind of like hearing someone rip a phone book apart. You know, and he played his press roll and just the whole room started shaking. It was just unbelievable to see that every time, not just the first time, every time.
Mamma mia. I can only imagine. I never got the chance of, seeing him. I moved here in the United States in 1996. I've seen all the videos and everything about Art Blakey.
Yeah.
But man, I would.
But see, you know what though, Pepe? I'll tell you something. Now, you didn't move until 96, but one of the things that I've always appreciated about your playing is that you have the spirit of that generation. And what I mean by that is that those guys played every single time like it was the most important time of their life.
Yeah.
Every single time. It didn't matter if it was a rehearsal, if there were 3 people in the club or 10,000 people outside. Every time they played, they gave everything. And that's how musically I was groomed. You every single time. Art used to tell me, he says, tomorrow is not promised. And I remember hearing someone else say, that the future is just the past that hasn't happened yet. So in other words, every time you play, it's got to be the most important time. There is no unimportant opportunity to play.
No.
And so every time you play, man, and it's not about volume. It's not about every time I'm playing loud. No, it's about your heart and your intent every single time. It's got to be, yeah. And you do that, and I appreciate that about you and your approach to playing.
Thank you. Coming from you, it's worth $1 million to me. I mean, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Let's see. Some other people asking some questions, but hey, guys, it's getting late, and I know Carl needs to go. But let's see. Some other questions here. I think so. Oof. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying still to learn this software.
That's okay.
Am I doing okay here?
This is great, man. It looks great.
Okay, Mr. Allen, what's your approach to racing?
Okay, that's a great question. So my approach to the ride cymbal beat, am I more focused on the quarter note or the Spangalang phrasing? It depends on who I'm playing with. First and foremost, it depends on the bass player, and it depends on the soloist and also the tempo. So one of the things that I encourage drummers to do is to study different drummers' ride patterns. Every ride pattern has what I call a shape to it. If you learn, say, Philly Joe, it has more of that triplet feel, right? If you learn Billy Higgins, it had more of that angular, what I call boogaloo feel. You know, when you listen to Jack DeJohnette, when you listen to Roy Haynes, they have this very loose thing where phrases go across the bar line. So a lot of it, I always say for me, when I play with someone, before the first measure is out, I need to be able to feel the center of their quarter note before the first measure is out. So what does that mean? Do they play on top? Do they play behind? Do they play down the middle? And there's a difference between playing on top and rushing, playing behind and dragging. It's a big difference between that. And then I need to make sure that I can find a happy medium. The most important relationship in the band, to me, is between the bass and drums. And our job is to make it dance. And so whatever I have to do to make it dance. There are some people I play with. And here's another thing. I sit with drummers all the time and I say, play me 8 bars a time on a ride cymbal and don't change the ride pattern. Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. They get to the 8th measure, ding, 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 ding. I said, no, ding, 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 ding. Just the discipline to be able to do that and sing a melody without changing the ride pattern. Now, for those who are watching who will say, well, man, you got to break up the ride pattern. I mean, it's boring like that. Okay. But what happens when you play with someone who doesn't want it broken up? So I did a record date. I produced a record date and I played on the record for this great tenor saxophonist named Frank West. And this is some years ago. This was my first time playing with him. And I'll never forget, Frank used to talk in this high pitched voice. And Frank said, okay, Carl, listen, baby. He said, you can do whatever you want to with them drums. I don't care. They can sound like they're falling down the stairs. But man, that ride cymbal, I got to hear ching, 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 ching all night. I said, okay, all right. So what was he saying? Don't break up the ride pattern. Now, it's not about whether you like it or not. It's about what do they need to make them comfortable? What do we need to do to serve the music? So again, going back to the question, the pattern in which I'm going to play very often has a lot to do with what's happening around me. Every time we play, we make what I consider informed decisions. What's informing your decision-making process? And if you play with seasoned players, as they start to play, you will be able to hear their references. You'll be able to hear who they listen to. So it might be a tenor saxophonist, and within the first 3 measures, you're hearing Dexter. You're hearing Hank Mobley. You're hearing Sonny Rollins. And just by their tone and their conceptual approach. And if your ears are mature, immediately you go to the same records they've checked out, even without having discussed this. And then from that, you start to have references. It's like, okay, let me do that. Let me do that. And it's not even a conscious thing. It becomes more of a reaction, to what's happening in the moment.
No, I agree 100%. Dude, guys, this is gold. What Mr. Carl Allen just said, this is gold. It's just like another thing. I have some of the students, and that they come to take lesson,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, I've been studying, Jim Chapin, which rest in peace. I loved him. I had the pleasure of meeting him. He was a great man, a wonderful human being, very dedicated educator. But I studied Jim Chapin book, The Right Hand and the Left Hand. I think it's a great book to to study the beginning for beginners to get used to the independence between right hand and left hand. But when it comes down to and I realized that when I was younger, that once I went through the old book, then I realized that my first gig, I was trying to apply that book, and I feel like this is all wrong.
Yeah,
and I felt right away this is so wrong. Yeah, I was young. I was only like 14, 15 years old. And then I realized, man, that's a great book for beginners. But when it comes down to play jazz music, all the stuff that you learn from that book, forget it. Because in my honest opinion, because see, it's just like the symbol beat.
Yeah.
It's not just like, as you know, and I wanted to say that because I know you can confirm it. And it's not just about the quarter note eight note that is 16. It's not
Yeah.
just that. I mean, it's all completely. It's a different world altogether
Yeah.
when it comes to play music. That's right symbol pattern can change, can be
Yeah.
different
Mm-hmm.
time. And then another thing, I feel like, like the bass players, they say, I'm analyzing the bass player. He's bouncing quarter note, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason my question was this, and you can say, Pepe, that's right, I agree, or I don't, and explain it. Why the right symbol has to be ding, jingy, ding, jingy, ding, if the bass player is playing ba-dong, ding, ding, the bong,
Mm-hmm.
bong. He's bouncing
Well,
it. Yeah.
yeah. Well, in my opinion, one of the reasons why it's so important, which is another reason why it's important for drummers to learn the melodies, because a lot of these jazz tunes, they're based off of what I call a triplet undercurrent. It's a rhythmic undercurrent based off the triplet. That ride cymbal is based off the triplet,
Yes.
right? And so, and again, if you don't believe it, just play the ride cymbal and sing a melody. Do 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 shoo do 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 shoo
Yeah.
do 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 da shoo do do on ooh diddly on ooh do 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 on oh do do boy do do ah ah and then the solos
Uh,
shoo
yeah.
do do yeah oh da shoo bo be da ah. Oble udo, shubo do do, shible udo, shadoodly heda, oh, shahodi ible ubede ow, shlahuba do shehu bide, shahuba do shibu, shubip, bobo do bo,
Yeah.
oh, shehible oble lady didi ow. Shaboti bibli oopity do oh 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 and that ride cymbal is swinging the whole band.
Yeah.
You know,
that
so you
was
know,
that was a great. That was great. I loved
but
it.
but drummers, man, that bread and butter's on that ride cymbal. You
Yeah.
know, it's like
Yeah.
if you play an R&B and that bass drum and snare drum is not locked up, you're gonna be at home watching cartoons.
Yeah. Wow.
You know.
That's right. Watching cartoons. No, that's true. Wow, that was great. And besides, and by the way, you can start singing right on tune. You did not change the key. You were on the same key the whole time.
Well, you know what though, Pepe? I'm hoping that one of these things you do, you will do talking about how, because people don't know how great of a piano player and a trumpet player you are, and how that influences your conceptual approach to playing the drums. People need to hear that from you.
No, I heard you singing right now, and you stayed in the same key for three choruses, the same key. You did not play any wrong or maybe flat or sharp notes. Maybe only one, but just a little bit because on the second chorus. But the whole thing was like, God damn! I loved it. You nailed it.
Oh man. But you know what? I remember asking Freddie about learning tunes, and he said, you got to be able to sing. He said, if you can hear it, you can sing it. If you can sing it, you got a better chance of being able to play it. You know, and a lot of us, when we start thinking about singing, we get intimidated as we're like, well, man, I'm not a singer. It's not about that so much as it is about feeling the inflection and understanding what another person is doing. So again, you can support them, you know?
That's that's true. That's true. Okay, here it is, Carl. I think this is one of the best live stream so
Oh,
far.
thank you.
Yes, I had a great one with Horacio last night.
Oh, he's great.
Oh, I love Horacio. He was in Cuba, and his internet connection was really bad. He said, "Pepe, we got good doctors here, but the internet connection in Cuba sucked."
I saw him. We hung out in Cuba a couple of years ago. I was down there for International Jazz Day.
Yeah. No, he told me that. He said, "Man, tomorrow we're gonna." Yeah, tomorrow I got Carl. He was like, "I'm gonna be watching it," but he's. Oh yeah, he loves you a lot.
He's a bad cat, man.
Um, okay, did I? Yeah, I think we did this one. Yes. Such a wonderful answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Crouch. Who's that? Thinking, no, I think this is it. I think this is it. I think we can go to the last question before we say goodbye. And see, the question is this: what would you suggest to the upcoming drummers?
Um, okay.
Any
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
advice?
Okay. So, for every student in a lesson, the very first lesson, I tell them, well, a lot of things, but one of the things I tell them is that there are two questions that you should be asking yourself on loop. In other words, while you're playing, these questions should be floating in your head. And that is, how does it sound and how does it feel? And I said that because quite often we don't ask that question until the tune is over, and then it's too late. So when you say what are some of the things I can suggest for younger players, is always be mindful of what's happening in the moment, right? Check out a lot of records, um, practice, listen. One of the challenges that I find with a lot of younger musicians, and it's just a generation, is people have such a short attention span. I ask drummers, or just not drummers, just young musicians, how much do you practice? Oh man, like a lot, really. How much? I don't 50, sometimes 55 minutes every other day. I'm
That's a
like,
warm up
really?
for us.
That's a lot. I was like, man, I said that if you were doing 2 hours a day, I would congratulate you on a warm up, you know. But
On the
but I
warm up.
mean, yeah, because you think about it, Pepe. I mean, you
Yeah.
see when we're young, we don't understand the brevity of time. We don't understand how short time is, and so we're not thinking about what's going to happen when I'm 40 and got a family and can't practice 8 hours a day. Now you got to get it in. Okay, we're in a pandemic, right? Everything's shut down. Everybody's gigs are canceled. Man, I had to learn to practice all over again because
It's
for
good,
so
right?
long, for so long, I'm practicing getting ready for a gig or for a record date. Well, that's all wiped out. So now I got this time. So okay, so now what is it? Back to basics. Working on stuff that I'm working on with students. I've gotten a lot of students during this time for Zoom lessons and stuff, but just really going back to basic fundamentals, man. Just trying to make it. So I always say, to answer that question, every time you play, you want to make sure whatever you play sound and feels good,
Yes.
whatever that means. Now, how do we get to that? A lot of listening, a lot of practicing, a lot of transcribing. I tell drummers all the time. One of the things we focus on when we practice speed, we power, volume, complexity. Okay, we all focus on that. But how many people actually focus on endurance,
Wow.
right? So you think about it, man. Playing with Freddie, man, we would take a tune, quarter note might be 540, you know, for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
That's one tune, you know? And so a lot of drummers now, man, if the metronome is past 232, after 2.5 minutes, they're in trouble
And the
because of
reason,
no endurance.
no, I agree. And the reason that's one of the reason why to answer some of the people, because for some reason the reaction of other, maybe other peers or drummers is like, man, you're always practicing on the snare drum. Yes, but if you pay attention of what I'm practicing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm practicing stuff that I am, first of all, in relax while
Mm-hmm.
I'm practicing stuff that will help me to develop certain endurance,
Yeah.
finger control, rebound stroke control, being relaxed and be able to play, but nice and relaxed, breathing in. Try to find that, the right, technique and to work on that technique in a way and to bring it to a certain level that I can play it in a certain, at a certain tempo and still being relaxed at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I'm always on a snare drum, checking out things and practicing what you said. Because it happened to me many times that
Yeah.
I realized, man, I play all that shit, excuse my French. I play all that stuff on the snare drum. But then what happened was, At this tempo, after 4 minutes, I was like, "What the hell is going on? I'm getting
Yeah.
tired."
Yeah.
And I had to figure things out myself. Nobody ever taught me that.
Yeah.
But I said, "What? The reason why we study technique is because we need technique in order
Yeah.
to relax
Yeah.
and be in command of the instrument."
Yeah. Well, see, the other part of that, I think, is, and part of it, I think a big part of it is generational. So, I'm 59, right? I think about guys like Harvey Mason, Buddy Rich, Steve Gadd, a lot of these guys Billy Cobham, who, when they first started playing drums, it was just a snare drum. When I first started playing, you don't say, okay, I want to play drums, and you got a drum set. You got a snare drum, and that's it. And then as showed a certain level of competency, then they would add on, your parents would add on, or whomever would add on, right?
My
You know,
better
my So I mean, when I first started, it was a snare drum. That was it. And then I got a smaller kit, just a 3-piece kit, no floor tom. You just couldn't afford it, and just you add a little bit at a time. But the point is, because you only started with the snare drum, you started understanding you got to get your hands together. So a lot of kids now, they don't know. They grew up with, you get a drum set, you go to the store, you get 8 drums and 68 cymbals, right? So it's like, okay, what does
Yeah,
that cymbal do? I don't know. What does that drum do? I don't
I
know.
don't know.
It looks hip and modern drummer, so that's one we got to get. So
Well, see,
Steve is asking, what's my favorite endurance
yeah,
exercise? As simple as this may sound, I always say everyone should have a 30-minute warm up. Part of that 30-minute warm up for me, 15 minutes, open and close rolls for 15 minutes nonstop, open and closed. And I tell you, roles are one of those things where we take for granted. We just assume everybody can play a role. Not everybody can play a role. And I'm talking about playing in such where your hands are balanced, where you close your eyes, you can't hear the difference between the right and the left. You know, it's just even. And I will tell you, when you first start to do that, open and close, for most guys, after 2-3 minutes, you stopping, you shaking, you calling mama to come help you. But it takes time to build up to 15 minutes. And Pepe, this, man, from traveling. Sometimes you have those travel days where you don't have an hour to do a warm up. You don't have an hour at the gig to get used. You got 15 minutes. You got 10 minutes. So after a while, you learn different warm up things that you can do in short periods of time to be able to get your hands together. And for me, rolls, paradiddles, and triplets, especially Swiss triplets, really help tremendously for me.
definitely, definitely. Well, Carl, I would like to thank you. Really, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
It's been a great, great, great interview. It's been a pleasure again for me to have your support, and I wish you all the best. And let's wish everyone to stay safe, especially nowadays.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And please, guys, as you guys know, Carl just said it. He's also teaching on Zoom or Skype. I don't know, whatever you're doing, Skype thing, right? Or Zoom.
Well, both, Skype,
Oh,
Zoom, or FaceTime.
so
Yeah.
feel free. Check him out. He might have no space available, but try him out because
There's always
Carl.
space available. Yeah. No, I've put together these tiered package over the summer, and I've reduced my prices, man, because it's really more about me trying to help and give back. And
Yeah,
everybody's hurting. Nobody's got gigs or money right now, so I've lowered my prices because it's really not about the money, but just trying to help. And this time for me is a time to reset, and I'm using this time to give back and to try to work on myself and do a lot of other things. Before we came on the air, you and I were talking about some personal health stuff, and we're all at that point, man. We're just trying to make things better, man.
that's it.
So it's that's the lesson thing is really about trying to do that. But you can email me, Carl@carlallen.com. But
Beautiful.
but Pepe, I appreciate you, man. I thank you so much for having me on. I can't wait till this is over so you and I can hook up and chill
Yeah,
and have one of those long things with the fire on the end.
Yes. Much love, Carl. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Love to the family, and thanks for your music and
Thank you.
for being here. Much love.
Okay.
Pepe.
Love you. Thank you.
Ciao.
All right.
We'll be back.
Ciao. All
Ciao,
right.
ciao.